Hey guys, welcome back. Today Casey's going to walk us through some basic AutoCAD commands and things to help with speed and efficiency, so let's learn.
Once you've gotten much more used to using your mouse hand to navigate in your drawing and to select different things, you can start to incorporate some of the more basic commands to put out really good products when drafting. So the basic commands that we use most frequently are commands like line, polyline, arc, fillet, offset, okay, among some other commands. So all of those commands that I just listed are the most basic commands that we use all the time when doing preliminary site plans or when drafting in general, okay? And you can do a ton of different things with those commands, right? So once you combine those with changing your UCS and you get really familiar, intimately familiar with how each of those commands work, you'll be able to draft almost anything, and then you can start to incorporate more advanced commands to do more advanced civil design and more advanced drafting. So we'll just run through those one by one now. So you have a line. Line is pretty simple. It's going to draw you a line. There's not any options or many more options that are going to show up in your command window here. So anytime you're using a new command, always enter the command and look at your command window down here and see if there's any other options that you can use, right? So it's going to display to me that my ortho is off. So if I do shift middle mouse, as discussed before, the ortho is on, right? So now there's, it's not going to tell me that my ortho is off. And then when I click, right, I can hit U for undo. And that's going to undo the last line that I did, and I can do that continually as it undoes stuff. So if I do a bunch, I can just hit U, enter, over and over again, and it's going to undo all the lines that I've just drawn. Or after I've drawn multiple polylines, I can do C for close, and it's going to close at the beginning of where I started my line. So the difference between a line and a polyline is that each line is not connected to another. It's simply one line with two vertices at each end. You can join lines together using the join command, and then they become a polyline here. So whenever you're drafting, it's pretty important when you're learning to draft to be able to look at your properties pane here and then see what entities it is that you're working with. So these are lines, and once I join them, they become polylines. Okay, I can draw a polyline directly by doing PL, enter. Okay, and then it works very similar to the way that a line works, except I have a lot more options here. I can do C for close just like line, but I can also do a bunch of other things. When drawing a polyline, you can also do Control Z while you're in the middle of drafting, and it's going to go ahead and punch in that undo command for you. So instead of hitting U, enter, you can hold Control and then just hit Z as many times as you'd like to undo. Okay, polylines, you can also draw arcs straight in polylines, and they'll output as polylines instead of arcs. So if I type A, enter, okay, now I'm drawing an arc, except it's going to be a polyline entity instead of an arc entity. So I can do a bunch of different things with the arc. I can specify a certain angle, I can specify a certain radius, I can specify the length of the chord line, I can specify a second point, meaning the midpoint of the arc. So if I hit S, enter, and then I can select the midpoint, okay, now there's a second point, right, that's always going to remain on the arc, and then I can click, right? I can do a ton of different things with the arc. So just remember to always look at your command window when you're familiarizing yourself with new commands so that you can see all the different options that are available within that one command, right? So same thing, I can do radius, R for radius, and I can specify a radius of 20, right? And now it's giving me a radius of 20, and it's going to restrict me from outputting any circle that has, a radius that's not 20. Okay. All right, so now we have polyline, we've gone over line. Offset, when you type in offset, you can see that you have a handful of different options. You also have the option to specify your offset distance. So most commonly, we're not going to be using any of these three options. We're just going to specify our offset distance. So if I specify it as 10 feet, right, if it already says 10 here, I don't have to type in 10 again. I can just hit enter. If I want to change it to 15, I can type in 15 and then hit enter. I can select my object to offset, and then it's going to offset for me. Okay, it's going to offset in either direction. If I want to offset a bunch of times really, really fast, say for parking, for example, I can type in M for multiple, right? And then I can click as many times as I'd like to offset as such. Okay. I can then use the fillet command to tie together different lines. So say I have two separate lines like this and I'd like to fillet them together with an arc. Hit F and then enter. And then you can look at the different options for fillet. You can first select how you want to fillet, so you can select your first object. You could specify the settings of the fillet, so you can change the radius, you can change whether or not it trims, etc. So, right, so those are the two main functions that we use within the fillet command. So the radius, right, I can specify it from 0 all the way up to whatever radius I want, as long as it's geometrically possible between the two objects that I'm filleting. So let's say I set a radius of 15. And then trim, I can turn on trim or no trim. Trim is going to trim both lines and then combine them together so that they become a polyline. If I turn trim off, it's simply going to add an arc. It's going to add that fillet as an arc entity and not trim. So I'll go ahead and turn trim off just to show as an example. I'll select my first object, then I'll select my second object. Okay, and as you can see, it's going to create an arc for me, and it's not going to do anything to these two objects, right? If I go back, so let's Control Z, fillet, radius 15, trim. Now we have trim on, so you can just type T for trim on. Select my first object, select my second object. It's going to extend this line to meet the arc, and it's going to chop this line off to meet the arc, and now they're combined all as one polyline. Okay, so filleting is going to allow you to combine your wireframed site, and it's going to form it into a more coherent image for you to continue drafting. Okay, and once you have a good grasp on all of these commands, line, polyline, offset, fillet, arc, you're going to essentially be able to draft pretty much any site that's thrown your way, right? You can navigate your drawing using just your mouse hand, select whatever piece of information that you want. Using all of our different middle mouse button commands, you can change your ortho, you could set your UCS to whatever you need it to be. You can use polylines, lines, offsets, and arcs to wireframe up your site, and then you can connect it all together using fillets, using more offsets, drawing more arcs, joining your lines and polylines together, and then you could start to apply some of the more advanced commands like CC to make your curb lines show up, etc. So now your site becomes more complete.